2, 1.
New York, NY. LaunchPod starts now.
Welcome to the New York LaunchPod, the New York Press Club award-winning podcast on new startups, businesses, and openings in the New York City area. I'm your host and New York attorney, Hal Coopersmith, and in this episode, we are doing something a little bit different. We did a live event at Lincoln Center in conjunction with the Brown University Real Estate Group to discuss the revitalization of retail on Bleecker Street. A little bit of background. Bleecker Street, a shopping mecca of the Sex and the City era, was hit by a lot of vacancy with stores that couldn't support the high rent. Brookfield, one of the largest landlords in New York City, bought up 7 storefronts on Bleecker Street and kicked off an innovative shopping corridor. On the panel, we speak to Duncan McCuaig, Senior Vice President of Leasing at Brookfield, and Dana Glaeser, founder of Slightly Alabama, a tenant on Bleecker Street, about all the exciting things that are happening about retail generally. And before we start, if you are a regular New York LaunchPod listener and have no interest about real estate, this is probably not the best episode for you, and I invite you to check something out on the feed. But if you are passionate about real estate, there is a lot of exciting things that I think you're really going to love. So let's go to the episode. Thank you, Kwame. I also want to appreciate Kwame here. The Brown Real Estate Group would not exist if it weren't for Kwame. And there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes. Kwame is also a directory of real estate, a human directory of real estate. So there are a lot of new faces here. If there's someone that you want to meet, odds are Kwame knows them and can introduce you. And really a lot of hard work behind the scenes goes to Kwame. But like he said, we're here to talk about retail and retail being dead. And there's a lot of talk about the demise of retail. Maybe it's the vacant storefronts around New York City, a lot of announcements of store closings. In 1 week, there was an announcement that 300 stores were going to close. That was between Gap, JCPenney, and Victoria's Secret. And then a few days ago, UBS came out with a report that said by 2026, 75,000 stores will close. But that's the lens that we operate in. And Bleecker Street is a great example of the demise of real estate and maybe the demise of retail and perhaps the rebirth, because there was about 40% vacancy on Bleecker Street, and Brookfield kind of swooped in and changed that around. And don't tell these two guys that retail is dead, because we have here Duncan McCuaig, who's the Senior Vice President of Leasing for Brookfield, and Dana Glaeser, who founded Slightly Alabama, a tenant on Bleecker Street. I thought it'd be really fun to have a landlord and a tenant talk about their experience. That's already getting a laugh.
We get along.
They love each other.
Just pay your rent, Dana.
Talk about their experience, what they're doing, what retail works, and how Bleecker Street has gone through a rebirth. And this is normally the part where each of the panelists introduce each other. But we have a presentation that Duncan wants to do, and we have a video to show what Dana. And I'm Hal Coopersmith. I'm a real estate attorney. Also, this conversation will be put on a podcast, the New York LaunchPod, which is something I've been doing. So why don't you take it away, Duncan?
So I promised Hal a couple things tonight. I would show up generally on time, wear something semi-respectable. I also, I'm reluctant to turn this into an infomercial on Brookfield, so I won't be doing that, regardless of what's on the screen. And I'm not going to babble on for too long, but he has handed a microphone to a real estate leasing guy, so anything could happen. But the program quickly, and I thought it made some sense just to set as context and background what Brookfield does retail-wise very quickly around the world, because I think that lends a little bit of background to what we did on Bleecker Street. We closed on that property, or those properties, the 7 storefronts, about a year ago, and we all got a lot of calls and emails and texts saying, what is going on? Why is Brookfield doing this? So the answers are going to lie in a lot of what we talked through tonight, and so far it's actually been a great success. So part of what we're talking about is creating sort of a test lab for retail. We handle and own some of the biggest retail properties, the most successful money-delivering properties in the world, but we thought this was a great idea, something that we could kind of dive into and create this test lab for retail and move some of these smaller really entrepreneurial, nimble retailers from a digital platform to a storefront. So with that, again, this is just background. Hal scared me when he talked about retail dying because we own about $25 billion worth of it. And I am a shareholder, so I don't want retail to die. But that's a combination of several acquisitions, namely GGP. So between GGP, Rouse, what we own alongside a lot of our office properties, you're up to about 150 million square feet of retail in the United States. Ala Moana Center in Honolulu is 2 million square feet. That throws off over $1,000 a square foot. These are just some of sort of our, again, biggest, best-known retail properties, again, setting the background for what we did at Bleecker, believe it or not. The Sono Collection, this is interesting. This is a mall development. We are so bullish on retail that we are the only developer in the country that is currently actually developing a suburban mall property from the ground up. So Sono is in South Norwalk, Connecticut, 1 million square feet. It's going to be spectacular. But again, we believe in retail, and we're putting our money where our mouth is in Connecticut. Brookfield Place, probably a lot of you have been there. That was a fantastic $300 million redevelopment. The retail there was terrible. It was awful. When it was the World Financial Center, the place basically closed at 6 o'clock. So when half the complex, and that's 8.5 million square feet, when one big lease expired for half of the complex, one of the big thrusts was to recreate the retail at Brookfield Place, and we did that. It's been a great success, and that drove all of the office leasing that we did above in the office towers. Manhattan West, that is underway. Those are renderings. This is a 7 million square foot development on the west side adjacent to Hudson Yards. Most of that retail is going to be opening next year. It's about 250,000 square feet. Again, it's adjacent to the office, but we've signed leases there with Whole Foods, Peloton, Danny Meyer. We're curating a food hall there now. We're going to do that a little differently than what we did at Brookfield Place. There's another rendering. That's from the roof deck of Union Square Hospitality's restaurant. So it's going to be fantastic. And again, to set the scene, this is normally what we do. We've gotten good at it. We create places. It's massive scale. And then on to Bleecker Street. So about a year ago, we had New York REIT was well into liquidation mode. We've all heard that story. And we bought an office building from them on 34th Street. And at the same time, their temporary CEO, who was really just overseeing the liquidation of the company, said, I have some storefronts on Bleecker Street. What do you guys think? We said, we'll take a look. Our CEO took a look. Our head of retail took a look. And $31 million later, we own 7 vacant storefronts on Bleecker Street without yet really a plan of what to do with them. And Bleecker Street, as Hal mentioned at the time, was really suffering. So it was 40% vacant, and there were about 30 vacant storefronts at the time. So our marketing team, our retail leasing team, and others sort of sprang into action to recreate this end of Bleecker Street, and in it make a real investment in the community, and at the end, in the end game, really reinvigorate a street that's got so much history. So that's circa 2000. That's Sex and the City. You know, people talk about Magnolia Bakery, and a lot of the filming of Sex and the City is one of the drivers of sort of the dark period of Bleecker Street, because following that, you had a lot of chains that moved in. You see some of them there. Brooks Brothers, Michael Kors, Burberry, etc. Michael Kors and Burberry were our tenants in some of those storefronts. Polo, they sort of took over the street, and it wasn't all good. Is an article from the Times exactly 2 years ago calling for the death of retail on Bleecker Street. You see it there. Swerve from lux shops to vacant stores. And the story was true because there were 30 vacant storefronts. And that's just really showing the location of ours. But again, the stats are on there. 40% vacant. That's just a staggering vacancy rate. That's not sustainable. And there's this is some of the imagery of the rebirth. So again, we took on a partner. We didn't really have the expertise to do this ourselves, but we took in a partner, Skylight Studios, who has become an expert in pop-up stores and really utilizing underloved spaces throughout the city. So with this vacancy, we thought it was a good opportunity for them to come in, help us find tenants, curate events, invigorate the entire streetscape. So one of their big ideas was to partner brands and artists, and I'm hoping that Dana can talk a little bit more about this. But each brand that came in and took a storefront had an artist partner that helped them curate the space, build it out without spending a lot of money. This wasn't about throwing money at a project. We do that often, and we do that well too, but this is not that. And we think that that's worked out extremely well. There's a project timeline, and I'm not going to bore you with stats and facts on this, but there's a couple takeaways throughout that, and one that I would look at carefully is the integration with the Chamber of Commerce and the Bleecker community. Any market that we go into, we strive to be a great corporate partner. We've done that in Battery Park City. We've done it in London. We're doing it on the west side of Manhattan now. If you don't partner with the residents, if you don't partner with the local community boards, you're making a huge mistake. We went about it the wrong way a couple times in history and paid for it, but here we brought them into the fold very early. There's pictures of some of the build-outs. And again, this was about bringing in partners. This was about a massive social media campaign, activation, and doing events. One of the requirements, and Dana can speak to this a little bit too, is that each of these retail tenants needs to hold events and activations. It might be music. It could be just a Thursday night get-together to show off some of their wares. But that was important because the entire streetscape, again, really needed to be reactivated. There's an idea of one of the local artists that joined us and did a tree wrapping up and down the street. Brand partner programming. There's one of Dana's events. That holiday night out actually was this past December, and it drove about 73% higher footfall that night than on a typical Thursday on Bleecker Street. And there's some of the pictures from that evening. It was a big success. And this is probably going to make everybody's eyes water, but again, it was the power of the social media that our marketing department unleashed. And again, big increases in footfall, big increases in Bleecker Street's website, things of that nature. And now here is sort of the rebirth. These are some of the brands that have decided or are thinking about dipping a toe back in the water of Bleecker Street. And actually, one of the things that we strove to do was to have the Times come back and do a story as about 2 years later as the neighborhood really started to rejuvenate. So we started with 30 vacant storefronts. We're down to 9. So WWD, Vogue, and the Times have all done stories now about the rebirth. So it was all gloom and doom, death of retail, on and on. But now the Times has come back and actually talked about a little bit about what we've done and about some of the leasing and how I think we're going about it the right way now. A typical Brookfield approach to an investment may have been to come in, spend a couple $1 million blowing up the storefronts, doing new stores and trying to get $500 or $1,000 a square foot. It's not about that. We're taking a very long horizon. And again, this is about moving smaller entrepreneurs from a digital platform, perhaps into a storefront, and then scaling them out of that store if everything sort of goes according to plan. So that's about it, except for this one important picture. That's my dog, Molly. She is obviously very cute, and she's in here. She's not a big consumer of retail, except for some chew toys and perhaps a snack or two. But my wife and I have promised to take her for a walk on Bleecker Street if she's good for a week straight. So she has that, and that's why she looks so happy in that picture. So I've spoken enough, I think.
They get a chance to get really close to the actual heart and soul and the processes of making our products.
And just pull until you feel like cutting all the
store.
There it goes.
It's not a hard sales message to say our stuff is made locally when they can actually see the workshop where it's made. So my name's Dana Glaeser. I own a brand called Slightly Alabama. Slightly Alabama is a line of leather goods, accessories, there's your certificate of authenticity, bags, briefcases that we make ourselves in our own workshop. And then in addition to our store, what we have is a weekly event series. And we built an event space in the back of the store, which looks like an old school dive bar. So now we've rounded our corner, and then we also have my workshop in the back of the store where we teach classes.
And then you're going to put this on top of that.
In addition to me making our products.
So basically out here what we have is the primary storefront, our retail storefront. What we like to do is live music on a regular basis. We've got Emily Dunk Band playing up here.
It's an event space that has been decorated to look like an old school dive bar. So we do call it the Slightly Alabama Dive, but it is not by any means an actual bar. So we kind of took it to the next level. We built a small program called Sip and Stitch, where we teach you 5 different products and take 5 different classes. And it's a social environment. Like you kind of hang out, meet new people. I'm not a professional retailer. I'm a designer and a manufacturer. So by nature, my workshops in the past have been places of community. It is this evolving kind of space. We've already built a really strong community here from the locals that is kind of masquerades as a store. Fortunately, as a store, we've also been very successful as well.
Please send an email to pod@nylaunchpod.com and visit nylaunchpod.com for transcripts
so that sets the
of every
scene
episode,
for
including
what Brookfield's doing and what Dana Brand
you are a fan of the
stands
show,
for. But Dana, you mentioned that
on iTunes
Brookfield
and
wanted to
Apple
partner with
Podcasts.
the community. When
Greatly
Brookfield talked to the
and
community,
does
what were
help
they
people
looking
discover
for?
the show?
With that vacant space that they had, 40% vacancy, what was the community saying that they wanted?
So the community was a little quizzical just because of our scale and size, but they were looking for a good partner. They obviously wanted the street to be reinvigorated. They didn't want to see massive chains moving in again. That obviously didn't work for the last 15 or so years. So while they, I think, were a little bit guarded, I think that they were happy about our enthusiasm. We jumped right in. We created a plan, and we're sticking to it. And again, Dana used the word authentic. That's what we're shooting for. Again, this is not big box retail. This is a lab to see what works. It's going to be educational for us. And by the way, this is an investment. As big as we are, we don't throw away $31 million. We're looking for all of these brands to succeed. And as I said, scale out of this space or do something creative, perhaps in another Brookfield property. That's the same size, but the neighborhood really just wanted the street to improve, and for us to succeed, one was going to lead to the other.
And so you also mentioned bringing on partners in order to find the digitally native brands, Skylight Studios. How did you find the brands that you wanted, the mix, and make sure that those brands would ultimately succeed?
So Skylight was big. Actually, one of our tenants, I would say out of the 4 primary tenants, one of them actually came out of a holiday pop-up show we did at Brookfield Place. So we have a lot of deep relationships. That's Margot, but the other 3 big ones were curated and found by Skylight. And again, Skylight's been a great partner. They're great with events, and they're great at activating underutilized space. I can't say that enough. And again, they have these deep relationships throughout the industry. But we were impressed with how they were able to find sort of the perfect mix. Look, not everybody will succeed. We know that. The retail world is still shaking out, but so far so good, and they've been a great partner.
And Dana, were you looking for a physical retail store to start, or did this opportunity kind of fall into your lap?
Yes. We started Slightly Alabama in 2013 out of our kitchen on the Upper West Side. So for 2 years, we built a 42 items in our catalog, 80 stores throughout the country who carried our products, and with a very patient wife, I stayed kind of sane through all of that. From that point, we moved into a factory out in Ridgewood, Queens, where we manufactured everything and began building our apprenticeship program. But then what ended up happening is that wholesale market started to change drastically, and we started to see smaller and smaller orders coming through. We started to see our own popularity grow, so that customers were coming straight to us. So the ability to own that customer relationship became my next focus. So we did a pop-up shop in Empire Stores out in Dumbo about 1.5 years ago, and it was hugely successful for us. So at that point, I was like, this is what we got to do. We got to build our workshop in a place where people can see us doing what we do, and we can engage with the consumers, build that relationship, and own that relationship, and not have to rely on third-party brands to our stores to carry our products. So then we did a little stint down at South Street Seaport for like a month where we kind of built out the concept on a larger scale. And then literally we were looking at leaving that space, and the day that we were told we were going to leave that space, I got a call from Skylight and said, do you want to talk about having your own store? So it was kind of really strange, and that literally happened. I think Skylight called me, and then 2 hours later we got the email saying, hey, you need to be out in 30 days for what was supposed to be a temporary pop-up thing. And within 2 weeks, we went through all of the presentations, the concept development on our side, the design work, because I think what was cool about it is that Brookfield said, it's your store, you design it. They didn't come in and say, or Skylight didn't come in and say, you need it to look like this. So we had total creative control over everything, and we opened the doors 2 weeks. I don't think that's the answer to your question, but...
And so now that this is your permanent location, what did you do, as opposed to a pop-up, what did you do to get smart about having a physical retail store, having that vision to make it a success?
Well, I'm not smart on it at all right now. Learning how to be a retailer, I'm a designer. That's what I started at, as a designer and a craftsman, and with a background in branding, so I understood that. But being a retailer is a completely different ballgame. Seasonality is something I don't understand. Literally working 7 days a week on it, but also having... the first thing I did is I built a dream team right away. I went to a woman who used to work with WWD and Donna Karen and said, I need you to design the store. Here's the concept. I want you to design it. And I gave her carte blanche. I said, you design it. I'm not going to question you. And then I went to a person who could build relationships with charitable organizations. I said, this is going to be a key to what we do. You run that. And so that was kind of the thing I did, was to know I didn't know anything. And I just wanted to design bags all day, but trusting those people. And then I have a retail director who came from RL. He was the head of the store for Will Leather Goods for a while, so he had a huge background on that. I said, you run that. So that was really just learning the logistics of being a retailer. I have a 2,200 square foot store now, and we carry 25 different independent brands in there. But I'm just a bag designer at the end of the day.
So that brings up a good point that Dana's new to retail. He's learning everything, on the go. Retail requires a lot of investment, people, time, resources. What are some of the things that Brookfield has done to make it easier on tenants like Dana?
The main thing is understanding that these weren't chains. We weren't putting anybody into any of these spaces and, again, saying, you're going to pay us $500 a foot. It's not going to happen. So we've worked out financial flexibility for each of our tenants that's going to allow them to sort of unleash the creative spirits, as Dana said, and not have to worry so much about the financial end of it. Again, this is an investment. At some point, we're going to recoup it. We certainly believe that, but we're there not to put a retailer out of business because they're crushed under the weight of a gigantic rent day one. So that was one of the ideas. Operationally, these storefronts didn't require a lot. Hal and I talked a little bit about the scale of my company. This doesn't require a 20-person staff, which is nice. And we did want our retailers to take some ownership of that. If every time there's a little leak or it's dirty in front of the store, they're calling the landlord, it's really not going to work out. We don't have a full-time person overseeing this. But from our headquarters at Brookfield Place, we help operationally wherever we can. But we're there always so that our retail tenants, and again, some of them have huge staffs if you're talking about a national chain brand, but we're there to help them flourish and not have to worry about the HVAC or a leak in the roof. And that also required coordination and a lot of communication with condo and co-op boards. These are condo, several condo structures and actually a co-op structure. So there was some interesting meetings had with the co-op board of the ownership of one of the buildings. But again, I think we've sort of crossed that hurdle. They trust that we're there with good intentions. And we hope that the handwriting's on the wall, that the entire street and the corridor is improving because of a lot of the hard work, not of me, but Brookfield Marketing, Skylight, the retailers like Dana.
And so with you being on Bleecker Street, Dana, how has that experience been? Why be on Bleecker Street to begin with?
Despite the fact that there was so much vacancy there, Bleecker Street is like the coolest street in New York City to be on. For a retailer, if you do what I do, an independent brand who is devoted to building community and to building family within the store. What I do, why wouldn't you want to be on Bleecker Street? The music history is there. I'm a musician. My father was a musician. We have music programming in there. We have a partnership with Rolling Stone magazine. We have partnerships with Artists Den. Like, music is what we do. Bob Dylan happened to do a few things in that area, right? Like, right around the corner, 2 blocks from where we are, a shop by a guy named Alan Block was a leather shoe designer in the 60s. He had his shop there, and he would often like stop doing business and bring in a bunch of like musicians from the 60s, and they would just have these jam sessions. Like, that's kind of it's cool to be there and not be at South Street Seaport or Fifth Avenue.
Brookfield Place.
I would love to be at Brookfield Place. Just because it's what we are. We're a jeans and denim, or a denim and boots brand. We have a bar in the back. We build community and family, and that's kind of the best street to do that. I couldn't think of another. I mean, I love the Upper West Side, but I couldn't think of another.
Well, it brings me to my next point, because you mentioned wholesale orders were going down, and that's part of the reason why you wanted to open up a retail store. Obviously, Bleecker Street makes sense for a nice hub for you, but could you see yourself being other places, expand your brand as a retailer, and then where would those places be aside from Brookfield Place?
Yes, San Francisco and Tokyo.
Why there?
Well, Tokyo is I love Tokyo, but it is a great market for a brand called Slightly Alabama. They seem to love Americana brands. I have a couple of friends who have shops over there that are very similar in nature and that seem to thrive, and I feel like that's a place where we could go and have bring a really unique idea, a retail concept to a city like that, and it would respond well. We've received significant over the past 5 years mentions in the Japanese press, so there's that. I've never been to San Francisco, so I just want to go there, and why not start a store in San Francisco? No, the West Coast, we have a huge customer base in the West Coast. Texas and California are our 2 largest customer bases outside of New York City, so I think we could do really, really well there. So.
And you also mentioned being a designer and not having experience in retail, but yet you're doing events, bringing community. Did you think about that ahead of time, and how important is having those activations at night and bringing that community in as a retailer?
It was kind of cool that that's what Brookfield wanted, because that's exactly what I want. Building family and building. Today, I spent 3 hours on a motorcycle trip throughout the city with 2 customers that I didn't know before I opened the store, and we're hanging out. We have people in the neighborhood who fight over who gets to watch our dog when we go out of town, because our dog is always in our store. Like, we have devoted ourselves to building community and building family there. I was not going to build a store or build my life around a business if it wasn't devoted to doing that, whether it was inside of a retail concept or a 5th floor office building or whatnot. And I knew that, well, social media is such an important part of retail, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that today, and it's been huge for us. If you don't build family and community locally, nothing else matters. It has to be done there, and you have to devote all of your time and energy to that. Not to the digital space first and hope that some cool people will hang out with you. It's got to be there, and it's got to be about that authentic experience there. And then that other stuff will start to work. We have a strategy around that. We have marketing plans around that, but that's not the core of. That shouldn't be the core of any business. That absolutely shouldn't be the core of any business, regardless of whether it's not retail. I spent 10 some odd years in advertising and marketing, and the thing that was missing was family from that space. And so I was devoted to leaving that completely, building my own business, and it was going to be about this, or I was not going to do it. Fortunately, or actually unfortunately, because I don't get a lot of work done anymore because we constantly have our new friends always in the store hanging out.
Buying things?
You know what? They do. They actually spend a lot of money in there, honestly. But they're always in the store. And I love them, but they're always in the store. So.
And Duncan, you mentioned that from a landlord perspective, activations were important in terms of bringing traffic to Bleecker Street. Do you see that as an important driver of retail on the landlord side, that in order to have a successful retail portfolio, that the landlords need to be active in terms of generating traffic?
Oh, absolutely. What we did at Bleecker was really an offshoot of a program that's been in place starting downtown for about 25 years, and that's Brookfield Arts and Events. It's actually the world's biggest privately funded art program. We do about 200 events a year down at Brookfield Place. And again, that is to drive traffic, drive activation, bring eyeballs. Like Dana said, create the family. Pre-9/11, 10,000 people. And again, this is a different neighborhood. It's a different retail project. But pre-9/11, 10,000 people lived south of Canal Street. That number is about 75,000 now. And if all of the great new retail, the gleaming new nice retail, and all the pop-ups and everything that we did at Brookfield Place, none of that would have been possible without the community involvement. That retail definitely would have failed. You can't just support it with an office population, and you need to bring the neighborhood in, and that's what we try to do everywhere we go. Again, Bleecker Street is just on a smaller scale. A lot of the arts programming, the music. Actually, one of the spaces didn't lease right away, so every Thursday we had music events, free to the public. It was really just a microcosm on a smaller scale of Brookfield Arts and Events, which is what we do literally around the globe. Canary Wharf. We're going to be doing it at Manhattan West, and again, Brookfield Place is our flagship, and again, that's probably about 200 events a year. So again, we need to partner with our retailers. Again, some of them are those big brands that we know can pay the rent, and then others need our help, and we're always there and happy to provide it.
And Dana, you mentioned that you went to Bleecker Street because it made sense because of the music background. Do you think that what Brookfield is doing here is repeatable in other neighborhoods in Manhattan and throughout the country? And how can, since they have a different vibe, how can they repeat that success?
Yeah, I think it's repeatable in San Francisco and Tokyo. Throughout
Kwame,
the city.
who do you know in San Francisco and Tokyo?
I think the West Village and I think Bleecker Street has this unique story, but it's not. I don't think it's like that could only happen on Bleecker Street in the West Village. It's the strategy and it's the approach. And I think I would assume that part of the strategy would be on finding another great community and figuring out our street or neighborhood and figuring out what is it about that street that we need to tap into. When we moved into, when we became a part of the project, we had to come up with a mission statement that said, what is your tie to Bleecker? How can you make a viable connection? Being from Alabama, it was a little bit difficult at first, but when I thought about the way in which music is going to be a part of my brand forever, that was the easy tie for me. And then we started the brand on the Upper West Side and, not very far away. Yes, it's definitely repeatable. Where in, I think the Upper West Side needs some. I think there's some cool stuff happening out in Brooklyn too. I mean, the Dumbo area is really cool, but I don't know that needs revitalization. That's a question way beyond my pay grade.
So back to Duncan, you mentioned that you started Bleecker Street as a lab for retail. What are some of the key learnings that you've taken from Bleecker Street that you can apply to the rest of your portfolio?
So again, it's scalability. It's the partnership. We've really tried to nurture each of these tenants. That's been key throughout this project. Beyond that, I think that we're learning and we'll be passing on that this is scalable. We think that this is a great learning experience for us. And hopefully tenants can take from this an experience where, again, the idea was not to crush them financially at all to start with, but to ultimately have everybody sort of flying on their own and have this be an investment that's going to work out for us at the same time, although that's very much for the next few years in the background. I hope I answered that properly, Hal.
With that, why don't we open up the floor to question and answer? If anyone has any questions.
So, my retail broker tells me that the rule of thumb, 10% of sales to rent, like a restaurant. I don't know if it's the same for retail. But how are you thinking about that dynamic from a kind of tenant economic standpoint? Like it's this revitalization, this community, it's all very good, but it's quite abstract. I mean, from an operating performance perspective of the tenant, I mean, do you expect your tenants to make rent through sales? Is it a marketing feature? I mean, how do you think about kind of tenant financial performance?
When a tenant is struggling, a retail tenant will often convert to a percentage of sales deal, or when a tenant is starting out. And without revealing everybody's sort of financial deal with us, there is no base rent on these. This is purely a percentage that partners us with them, and that's the concept again of not crushing a tenant. The 10% is really a moving target. It really is for restaurants. That's the health meter. But we've done it's almost like a circular problem. We've done such a good job of leasing to some restaurants of getting a really high rent that they've actually had to close shop. So that is a balancing act. unless it's a chain like a Del Frisco's. But those are some of the lessons learned that we brought here. And we had sort of talked around and experienced concepts like this before. We did the first food hall in New York at Brookfield Place, and two of those tenants had graduated from food trucks. So those were ones that we had to sort of carefully, work through the finances first. But it's a delicate act, and if you work out a deal where a tenant is paying a percentage of sales, then you truly are partnering. And all the help that we can provide is going to help get the rent paid.
So is the idea that Slightly Alabama is going to get your support while it grows and increases their sales until some break point at which they've outgrown their space, and then you're going to put them in one of your larger spaces?
I wouldn't say that we have a roadmap set. We're gonna again partner with our tenants. There's nothing set. There's nothing that says, okay, you're going to be with us for 2 years, and then you're going to open a big store over here and pay us rent. I think really right now it's a pretty casual approach, and to see how it works, it has to work for everybody. It's got to be a win-win. I don't know if Dana has a different view on that, but this was not a 10-year plan. This was a couple years plan, and see how it goes. And if he grows out of that space and is super successful somewhere else, but it's not with us, that's great. I would love to see it. But Dana can also opine on that.
Well, we have a great relationship with the senior executives over at Brookfield, from the marketing team to the global retail team. And the thing they do is they challenge me on what is my 6-month, 12-month plan and how are we going to grow our business, but in an encouraging way. It's not in a, like, we need money. When are you going to give it to us? It's really it feels like an incubator on some level. So, we don't have a plan. We haven't been asked or told that we have a specific plan, but there is encouragement. I mean, obviously we want to make $1 billion, right? This isn't a hobby, right? So it's good to have that kind of nudge in the back, but it's not pressure. It's okay, what's next?
On the right.
How do you find new retail partnerships? Do you seek them out, or do they come to you? What's the sort of balance in terms of finding new talent in the retail space?
It's broad based. I mean, it depends on the project. Yeah, at a Manhattan West, for instance, it's we have 2 different brokers on site. One for the restaurants. That was the Danny Meyer relationship, and then we have another broker that's handling most of the store leasing that did the Whole Foods and the Peloton deals. It's all of the above. And look, there are good things and bad things about working for or working with such a big company, but GGP is an endless supply of retail leads, even though they are truly at their core a mall operator. The senior members of the leasing teams and the management teams at GGP are a constant source of relationships. So look, it's not easy. I know that our retail broker really scours the globe for these partnerships. They go to London, they go to Tokyo. They're constantly traveling to try to find sort of a next cool, progressive, trendy brand, whether it be food, entertainment. We have a term sheet in place with an entertainment anchor following our fitness anchor and our food anchor, which is Whole Foods and Peloton in Manhattan West, and it's a new venture. Retail is a tricky business and a tricky game, and so the financial wherewithal might not be there, but it's a partnership of music. A great restaurateur from Brooklyn, and also somebody who's been in the entertainment world for about 20 or 30 years, and they're going to do a theater and restaurant venue. So it kind of comes from all of the above, but that team is constantly scouring New York City, the country, and the globe, really, for those next partnerships.
In the middle.
Can you talk a little about the thought process behind the development in South Norwalk in the context of, Dana mentioned a few times that potential other locations would be San Francisco and Tokyo, and maybe other retailers would add, like LA and Seattle, but you don't really hear retailers saying, I desperately want to open a store in South Norwalk. So how did you guys decide to do economic development?
Yeah, so That's a different part of the company. That is GGP. I can't answer that question perfectly. My wife and I we're longtime residents of Fairfield County, and the feeling was that the malls that are in southern Fairfield County were pretty tired. There was no destination for luxury. It truly is going to be a luxury upscale destination. It's in a great location. It's right off of 95. The basis was very low. That's what we do. We're good at building, and it's definitely the investment thesis of Brookfield is very contrarian. When anybody is zigging, we're zagging. Right after the dislocation in 08 and 09, we were just raising as much money as possible to buy as much as we could. When everybody was hiding under their desks, we were out buying things. So it's a little odd to be building the only mall in the U.S., but the leasing has gone really well. Those last few sort of 10 or 20% are always tough in a leasing project like that. But they've got great confidence that it's going to be successful. There's a lot of wealth concentrated in that little circle. It's right near the Westchester border, and it's not. And Sono, South Norwalk is a very cool market. You kind of feel like you could be in Tribeca or Soho, when you're walking around it. So I think that they took all of those factors into account. And again, it's all about the land and the basis when you're building a project like that. And we'll know in a couple of years.
In the back.
Are brands able to apply to be part of the project?
Absolutely, yeah.
What's the process there?
Most of the inquiries are coming through our partner, Skylight Studios. But I think you may have already given me your card. If you haven't, do so. And I will make sure it gets to the right person.
Are you providing other additional wraparound services to these tenants, like marketing, accounting, financial, anything other than just the creative leases?
No accounting or financial, a ton of marketing. That's really the heart of the success, we think. The arts and events team at Brookfield and the marketing team at Brookfield comprise together the biggest department in the entire company. So tons of marketing support. Again, the stats are there, and it's been successful, and that's been helpful for the entire street. But beyond that, no, I don't think there's anything else. I mean, we're not. I don't think we're in the spot where we can dispense good advice. We just want to put them in that position to flourish, but as much in marketing and support with their space as they need.
Well, Dana, you mentioned that Brookfield was helpful in terms of setting goals. What were some of the support that they gave you in terms of helping to think about your business more critically?
Well, I mean, I think just asking for, our total marketing plan, our revenue plan, like how are we going to get to certain places. So just having those nudges. But they've also, the other thing, they've also been very supportive of actually coming and being my customers. They've shopped with us on a regular basis, and they come to our events. So that's actually really nice, because when your landlord walks in, you're hoping that they're coming in to buy stuff and not to yell at you for not paying rent. You pay rent. Yeah.
Duncan's ready to buy something. Nathan?
Question for Dana. I'm curious, along with what the demographic of tenant are you seeing as far as neighborhood tenant from the West Village? Is it downtown? Are they
our customers?
Yeah, your customers.
The coolest thing is that when we open, we were open from 11 to 7 originally. Now we're open from 12 to 8 because our hours during the week are 6 to 8, and it's 99% local customers, live upstairs, live across the street. We certainly have tourist traffic coming in, and we certainly have traffic from the Upper East Side or Williamsburg or Brooklyn, but the majority of our customers are locals, right in within the immediate 2 or 3 blocks. Our brand, the way we're set up is we carry about 25 different brands. They're all independent designers. The majority of people who walk into our store have never heard of any of the brands that we carry. All of the designers that we carry are all my personal friends that are brands very similar to mine. And so when people shop there, they're discovering something that they've never seen before. The majority of our brands you can't find anywhere else in New York City also. And we often have people who, our repeat customer is huge. Like it'll be people who live upstairs will come in and spend $2,000-$3,000 over the course of a couple of months on the same brands. So that's been really cool. That's when you know you've got like a neighborhood place, not just because people hang out and drink free beer, which they do, but because they come back over and over and over again to shop and to find out what's brand new from Free Note Cloth out of San Juan Capistrano that's not available anywhere else in New York City, that we're releasing on a regular basis. So, yeah, I mean, we truly are kind of like a neighborhood store, I think. Not just because of the events, not just because of that, but I think people trust us to... Well, one thing that was interesting is we saw that in December, while our revenue for the month of December increased over the previous months, our average ticket decreased significantly. And it was... what happened was we're a men's shop. We saw fewer men coming in and more women coming in looking for gifting items, but we don't have a lot of gifting items. So, and then the traffic picked up after Christmas, and what it was guys coming back to shop for themselves again, right? They weren't shopping for themselves in December because they were buying for other people. And then they started shopping for themselves again afterwards. And in November, we had, like, our ticket price was like, average was $250, $350. We were selling $1,800 jackets. But in December, it was like, oh, here's a pair of socks I'll buy, and so on and so forth. So it was kind of cool. And this month, we are halfway through the month, and we're trending to be 30%, to have 30% higher revenue this month than we've had in any month, our biggest month, which was December. And it's almost it's 100% people buying for themselves. So that's been really cool to see happen. I don't know if that answered your question. But.
Totally. I have one quick follow-up question. For Bleecker Street generally, or for Love Bleecker generally, are you seeing the same kind of customer coming? Is it more a local customer, or should you get some reporting from their various companies?
Surprisingly, we actually don't have good tracking of that. But the brands all seem to be doing well, and again, mostly came off of digital platforms. So I couldn't answer that for the other ones, but I'm guessing it's along the same lines as Dana just outlined. Neighborhood, city-based, along that avenue, I believe.
And have you found different ways of engaging people with the other brands that are your friends to do events around them, to cross-promote with your store?
Well, we do a lot of like trunk shows. We do a lot of we fly in the brand owners if they don't live in New York to do events and parties. And they do a lot of cross-promoting. One of the brands we carry is a company called Cockpit USA, which are outerwear. And they have a showroom on 39th Street that's open Monday through Friday, 10 to 5. And then we're the only other outlet for those guys. I think in November we did something like $17,000 in jackets with those guys. I think this past weekend we did $8,000 in their product, all from them driving traffic straight to us. So it was easy when I had to jump in on this in 2 weeks and find. One of the things I had to do was figure out how to get 25 different brands in here to fill out 2,200 square feet. When I called the brands up that were my friends, they trusted me and said, yeah, we'll do this with you. But also when they found out that I was on the corner of Bleecker and West 10th, they were like, hell yeah, we want to have a presence in that space. We're proud to have a presence in that space. And so they do a lot of cross-promoting because of the address.
Danny?
Are other landlords on the block following suit and getting creative, or do you find that they're still holding out for credit tenants like used to be on Bleecker?
It's the former, happily, because we're down to 9 vacant storefronts now. So the vacancy rate has dropped by almost 20%, I believe, approaching 30%. So look, like I said, that was 15 or so years of retail that was sort of miscast for the neighborhood and for that street and didn't work. So it's like I said before, smaller, more nimble brands. For now, I don't think you're seeing the big brands come back in, which I think may be a healthy rebirth for the neighborhood.
Back.
we don't have a partner on this. It's owned on our balance sheet, so it was us pitching it to ourselves. But I'll tell you that the relationship with New York REIT went to the top of New York REIT. Like I said, they had a liquidator CEO after the financial shenanigans that they had, and the idea was pitched directly to the right guy, Rick Clark, our chairman. And he passed it along to our acquisitions teams and leasing teams and marketing teams and said, could we do something cool? If it's going to be a waste of time, let's not do it. But it was a thumbs up throughout, and we like to buy things. So it was a moment in time that worked out. The relationship was there with New York REIT, and I think it's been a great experience. I'm hoping it's been a great experience for all of our retails. But like I said, it really is an incubator and a test lab, and we're going to learn a lot from this. And again, we can help with the scaling.
Let's make this the last question.
So going back to the sort of concept of is retail dead, and I think extrapolating from your experience on Bleecker Street and also South Norwalk, I guess I'm curious because it sounds like what we're seeing is there's definitely a market for one type of retail experience, which is very idiosyncratic, highly programmed, very authentic, and maybe requires a smaller scale in select locations, premier cities, historic neighborhoods. And then there's a broader, baseline level of mass market retail that the market just will support, and you need some stores in every neighborhood, and probably less than we've had historically. And so I guess, thinking about that, how would you react to this question of, the overall retail market still is irreversibly going to shrink, and so while any one player might scale a concept, overall, a lot of retail space has to be put to other work, or rents are ultimately going to come down across the board still.
That's a really good question. My wife and I live on the Upper East Side, and the retail mecca of the Upper East Side, I should say. And there is a lot of vacancy up there, and you can see it. And it's always on my mind because you want to see things turn over. And I'm not sure in a neighborhood like that what that next driver is. I mean, how much more food can the neighborhood support? When you see a great corner space on First Avenue or even York, where I live, you're hoping that a great restaurateur is going to come in because it's feeling a little bare up there. It's feeling like there needs to be some kickstart to that. And I'm not sure what that is. It's neighborhood by neighborhood, and there's plenty of new residential going in. But I look at some of these older buildings, a corner 5-story walk up, and thinking, why is that sitting vacant? Is it a family owning it who just won't capitulate and do a cheap percentage deal with a great restaurant where there's upside for the owner at some point, break points where they start to make real money, or partner with them, or build it out for them and do a management agreement? I'm not sure what the answer is in certain neighborhoods, but I think we all know this is a very resilient city, and I think it's going to all come to some kind of conclusion. I hope that's answering your question, but we're focused on neighborhoods. Like I said, it's Brookfield Place and Canary Wharf and building places. So kind of street by street and block by block really isn't our thing. But I think we all have a big interest in seeing the city flourish and be successful. So when you look at it in that context, you want to see more boutiques come in. You want to see more of the smaller entrepreneurial. Near 86th Street, you can get anything you need. That's where all the chains are. But as you get a little further from that center, you see more vacancy, and I feel like there is an opportunity for smaller, nimbler boutiques or restaurants. But I think we're still just waiting for that right now, unfortunately.
Well, it seems like that the answer is that what used to work isn't going to work in the future as online sales pick up, as people have different needs, and so needing to innovate and do something different than what worked in the past, rather than just, here's my building, let's charge rent. What Dana said, build a community, get people involved, what you guys are doing, is part of the equation, and the rest of the equation isn't there yet. People are still trying to figure that out, but the answer is that what used to work in the past just isn't working in the future. I think that's a great note to wrap things up on. I want to thank Duncan McCuaig and Dana Glaeser for coming, and thank you everyone for being here.
of wine.